stigmatized, and whose remembrance was tainted with lies, can finally find peace. Now it's in our hands, fellow Americans, to prevent a civil war in our beloved country. Now the activities of the criminal terrorist anti-cult group will inevitably be stopped. For a long time, the threat they posed was underestimated. But now, their true essence has been revealed. It might seem that anti-cult organizations and their representatives act independently, but as you already know, they are actually well organized, and their actions are coordinated. The Control Center for International Anti-Cult Terrorism, where those snakes have made their nest, is located in Russia. From there, they were picked up by a hidden force, grandmasters who have placed anti-cultists on the geopolitical board as their pawns and begun their game. They have turned various media outlets into transmitters of destructive, manipulative messages, inciting citizens to hate, kill each other, and commit terrorist acts. At the same time, they urge government officials and law enforcement to act unlawfully, immorally, and inhumanely. And they compel politicians to make catastrophic mistakes. Representatives of anti-cult organizations in various countries of the world are already behind judges, law enforcement officers, politicians, and government officials, exerting covert impact on them. They have already gained leverage in some European countries. The most damage during their activities has been inflicted on Russia and Ukraine, and for 30 years they've been methodically and purposely moving towards starting a civil war in the US and Europe to ultimately destroy democracy worldwide. Once, the ideological inspirers of anti-cultists turned the ideology of National Socialism into the monstrous racist totalitarian form that we know today as Nazism. At that time, anti-cultists managed to embed their perverse brainchild at the government level. Thus, the ancient methods and tactics of predecessors of anti-cult organizations became the national ideology of Nazi Germany. They succeeded once, and now the anti-cultists of your time, along with the force behind them, are trying to replicate their success in Russia and Ukraine, aiming to eventually spread and reinforce Nazi methods and practices in the European Union countries, so as to ultimately reach the United States. Behind all the provocations against Islam in recent years, which you observe and wonder why they are happening, there are anti-cultists and global anti-cultism as a whole, striving to implement their plan of establishing a totalitarian regime worldwide. They have pushed our world to the brink of nuclear war, genocide against Muslims, and complete destruction of democracy, freedom of speech, and human rights. What I've just said is backed by facts. Recall what you have seen and learned in this film, and rest assured that it shows just a small part of the horror that anti-cult organizations and their architects of consciousness are perpetrating with impunity nowadays. They have destroyed families, ruined lives, and caused millions of deaths. All of this has been done by just one branch of the entire global anti-cult network, but it is the most advanced and active of all. It includes those who have managed to dismantle many democratic laws and bring much suffering to people. And I must say, they have achieved a lot. Through their informational terrorist attacks, the anti-cultists have managed to manipulate public consciousness so thoroughly that now people must work hard to rid themselves of deep-seated beliefs which they think to be their own. Although in reality, many of those beliefs are dangerous foreign bodies embedded by anti-cultists, and they are so deeply rooted in people's minds that many of you no longer distinguish them from your own ideas. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing investigation, we cannot reveal everything today, because the situation is actually even worse. But even what has been said is enough to realize the danger our world is in and to understand what must be done to ensure that freedom and democracy do not become relics of the past and mere history. Now you know how to save this world. Before your eyes, a phenomenon far more horrifying than Nazism has unfolded, the one that has already harmed more people than both world wars combined. Representatives of anti-cult organizations and global anti-cultism are guilty of numerous crimes against humanity. Having revived the legacy of Nazism, they engaged in organized terrorist activities for an unacceptably long time, initiated wars, committed acts of genocide, and planned a large-scale genocide that could engulf billions of people. Using deceitful and cynical methods, they have waged a hidden, undeclared war against the entire humankind. But now the time has come for the activities of the anti-cultists to be scrutinized, exposed, and brought to public trial. And this will not just be a judicial process. It will be a historical moment when justice will triumph over evil. It's a moment when the world will hold accountable those who violate the most fundamental human rights. It's a moment when all of us must rise and say, never again.
Chapter 7: Trial.
Now, it is time to draw a line under all the atrocities of the criminal transnational network of anti-cult terrorists and their backstage leaders. Humanity now stands on the brink of catastrophe. We are faced with a socially dangerous phenomenon that has given rise to unprecedented forms of international terrorism of an informational and psychological nature, global anti-cultism. This phenomenon undermines the foundations of our society, threatening the fundamental principles of democracy. Anti-cultism is, in essence, a new form of Nazism. Representatives of global anti-cultism have been behind numerous wars, terrorist attacks, and an attempt to bring the world to a new genocide. They have betrayed their people and their homeland. They have sold out and betrayed even their own children and their future. Billions of people have already suffered at their hands. If we wait any longer, if they are not stopped, eventually everyone will suffer. They have already changed the world, infiltrated your minds, and sought to use your own hands to destroy this world. Therefore, the main task now for all people is to prevent this and do everything to eradicate anti-cultism and its destructive methods from our society, and to defeat this evil once and for all. Only then will justice, goodness, and truth prevail, and only then will you be able to reclaim your freedom and peace. To make this possible, evil must first be exposed and brought to justice.
Within the framework of global anti-cultism, numerous crimes, including particularly serious ones, are committed. According to the 8th review of the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy, adopted by the UN General Assembly on June 22, 2023, the activities of members of anti-cult organizations and their accomplices fall under acts, methods, and practices of terrorism. These are not just crimes. These are acts of terror directed against all of humanity. In accordance with the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, adopted by UN General Assembly Resolution 260, 3rd, on December 9, 1948, and ratified by 153 countries, the activities of members of anti-cult organizations and their accomplices are classified as genocide. According to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, adopted on July 17, 1998, and participated in by 124 countries, the activities of members of anti-cult organizations and their accomplices are classified as genocide and crimes against humanity. Thus, considering the scale and degree of social danger posed by these crimes, all representatives of anti-cultism and everyone who directly or indirectly, through their actions or criminal inaction, aided them in committing these crimes, must be held accountable for carrying out a series of terrorist acts, committing genocide and crimes against humanity and all of humankind. For all these grave crimes, there is no statute of limitations.
Over the course of 30 years of criminal activity by anti-cultism, billions of innocent people have suffered, causing significant harm to their physical and mental health. And these aren't just numbers, these are lives that have been maimed or destroyed. The phenomenon of anti-cultism is unprecedented in its inhumanity. Today, law enforcement, judicial, and international legal bodies, as well as the media, have been infected by anti-cultism. Therefore, an entirely new approach is needed to eradicate this phenomenon and compensate for the damage it has caused. History remembers how in 1945, an unprecedented judicial body was established, the International Military Tribunal, which, as part of the Nuremberg trial process, convicted the crimes of the Nazis. Similarly, today, by the legitimate demand of the people themselves, a special international criminal tribunal must be established to investigate and prosecute all those involved in anti-cultism and its crimes against humanity.
Global anti-cultism, as a new form of Nazism, is an unprecedented phenomenon and requires the establishment of a separate international criminal tribunal for its examination. In fact, just like nowadays, during the Nazi era, society did not fully grasp the scale of the crimes, and only judicial processes were able to reveal them. Similarly, it is now necessary to create a new tribunal that will address the crimes of anti-cultism and informational terrorism. Such a tribunal will uncover the truth about this phenomenon and show society the real number of victims. An investigation is currently underway intending to identify all individuals involved in the crimes of anti-cultism. Inevitably, the ideological inspirers, organizers, and key figures of global anti-cultism will be sentenced. Additionally, accomplices in anti-cultism crimes among representatives of government services, security forces, law enforcement, and judicial bodies will be held accountable. All those who exerted unlawful force on innocent people. Those who, using their official positions, participated in falsifying evidence of guilt, fabricating criminal cases, and committing unlawful acts of violence, as well as those who acted under the necessity to follow orders from higher authorities, fully aware that such actions were illegal. All of these individuals knowingly violated the law and the oath they took to serve their people, thereby carrying out actions against democracy itself. The International Criminal Tribunal will hold all individuals, regardless of their status, social standing, or importance of their positions in governments, accountable for complicity in terrorist activities, actions on the enemy's side aimed at undermining the constitutional order and the foundations of democracy, and aiding crimes against humanity directly or indirectly. The court will be precise, just, and uncompromising. The decisions of the International Criminal Tribunal cannot be appealed, reviewed, or overturned by any other judicial body. Initially, criminal cases can be initiated in individual countries affected by the anti-cultist informational terrorist acts. In accordance with the existing legislation, individuals suspected of committing acts that threaten state security, including treason and terrorism, shall be held accountable under the law and may be subject to trial in a manner that ensures respect for the principles of justice. Subsequently, it is proposed that all cases be consolidated within a single international judicial process. The tribunal will consider charges against representatives of global anti-cultism for terrorism, genocide, and crimes against humanity. The case should be conducted with maximum public disclosure so the public can stay informed of the proceedings. The process must be as transparent as possible and under the observation and control of society. In addition to determining the punishment for all those involved in global anti-cultism and its criminal activities, the Special International Criminal Tribunal will also establish a mechanism for compensating all individuals who have directly or indirectly suffered from anti-cultism over the past 30 years. Compensations will include financial, medical, and psychological assistance. It will be funded by the countries and organizations that supported and financed anti-cult organizations. Every person who has suffered from terrorist acts conducted by anti-cult groups, anyone who has incurred material, financial, psychological damage, or health impairment directly or indirectly through informational terrorist acts, will have the right to claim monetary compensation from the countries that aided the terrorists. Additionally, compensation will be provided to the relatives of those who died as a result of actions by anti-cult organizations and their accomplices, as well as to the relatives of those who were driven to suicide by such actions. As a result of the investigation, a list of such countries will be compiled, and according to the court's decision, these countries will be obligated to pay reparations to all those affected by anti-cult activities. Special consideration will be given to countries that openly supported anti-cultism, funded it, and allowed anti-cult representatives to turn their countries into testing grounds for their Nazi methods. These countries will be required by the International Tribunal to pay reparations, not only to citizens of other countries affected by anti-cultism, but also to their own citizens.
Over the past 3 decades of existence of global anti-cultism and anti-cult organizations, a large number of people, including Scientologists, Krishna worshippers, Jehovah's Witnesses, and representatives of other religious, as well as secular organizations, have been slandered, persecuted, and defamed. Denying that various organizations and individuals have been subjected to illegal persecution in violation of human rights and freedoms, which has been organized by anti-cult organizations, is equal to denying the Holocaust. With this in mind, all those who have suffered from the activities of anti-cultists should be equated to those nations and peoples who suffered during the genocide committed by the Nazis. As soon as anti-cultism is defeated, they should also be entitled to reparations from the nations that supported the development of anti-cultism in their countries. In addition, the use of discriminatory terminology that has been artificially introduced by representatives of anti-cult organizations should be severely restricted. The use of the terms cult, sect, destructive cult, totalitarian sect, and their modifications in relation to religious or secular organizations should be regarded as support and propaganda of Nazism. Whoever stigmatizes anyone with these terms in equal measure declares his or her support for Nazi methods. Such actions must be punished in the same way as promotion of Nazi ideology. Modern anti-cultism embodies a new, even more insidious and brutal form of Nazism. The evidence previously presented shows that anti-cultists have engaged in deliberate actions aimed at the systematic destruction of humanity. Given the current situation, where the most horrific terrorist acts of the 21st century are being carried out by media representatives, it is time to hold all those involved accountable for their years of destructive and subversive activities. All direct or indirect accomplices of anti-cultism deserve to be on the bench of the accused alongside those they worked for and whose orders they followed. Whether consciously or not, they were part of a unified plan to carry out a series of terrorist acts, commit genocide on an unprecedented scale, and establish a single global totalitarian regime. Additionally, the court will remain steadfast in its decisions if some individuals who publicly supported anti-cultists attempt to prove their innocence by arguing that they were manipulated and deceitfully involved in international criminal activities. It must be understood that in this case, accomplices of anti-cultism are as guilty as the accomplices of Nazism, who closed the doors of gas chambers in concentration camps and then released the gas. Any attempts by these individuals to gain recognition of their innocence are equivalent to declaring the accomplices of Nazism innocent. Those who, acting voluntarily or even under duress, opened the gas and murdered thousands of innocent people in gas chambers. Before the law, accomplices and sympathizers of anti-cultists are just as guilty as the journalists who committed informational terrorist acts, causing immense harm to humanity, their own countries, and their citizens. By doing so, they contributed to the destruction of freedom and democracy worldwide, thereby destroying our beautiful world and leading it into the abyss of tyranny and despotism.
Therefore, all individuals involved in the case of anti-cultism, including all accomplices, must be held accountable under charges of participating in terrorist activities, committing terrorist acts, genocide, and crimes against humanity. The crimes of anti-cultism are unprecedented, excluding any possibility of leniency towards any of the participants. Additionally, as a necessary step before the commencement of judicial proceedings, measures must be taken to inform and notify the public about the trial. People need to be warned and made aware of the charges against each accused and the severity of their crimes. It is necessary for people to have a correct perception of the actions of the court and the bodies enforcing the court decision as being lawful and aimed at protecting humankind from a new form of Nazism. Therefore, people must be informed about the nature and scale of the entire criminal activity of the anti-cultists, which is directed against all of humanity, as well as the severity of the crimes committed under global anti-cultism.
In this regard, the investigation results presented by Dr. Egon Shalakian are particularly valuable. This is the starting point that laid the foundation for the events unfolding now in the legal field. It made it possible to identify and defeat the hidden enemy that had been undermining the foundations of freedom and democracy for an unacceptably long time while remaining unnoticed, and henceforth, to ensure that this never happens again, preventive measures are necessary. Therefore, now more than ever, there is a need to create, at the lawful request of the people, a unified organization, SHIELD, with international status and special powers to stand guard over human rights. The goal of this global organization will be to protect freedom and democracy by any legal means available, anywhere in the world. We defeated Nazism, and we are close to victory over anti-cultism, but we do not know what we may face tomorrow. As humanity, we must be confident that no new, more insidious and invisible form of this evil will emerge in the future, and we must ensure that this phenomenon is permanently barred from our world. This international organization should serve as the instrument to act as the shield of freedom and democracy against all possible threats, ensuring that no activities aimed at undermining a stable and secure world are allowed. The SHIELD organization will have all the authority to stop any attacks on freedom and human rights. It will ensure that the law and judicial system work for the people, not against them. Once, right after the defeat of Nazism, we missed our chance. Even then, knowing and understanding how, at the instigation of the anti-cultists of that time, the Nazis operated on a psychological level, how they implanted destructive images, and how they manipulated people's minds. At that time, alongside the United Nations, there should have been an organization aimed at protecting people from the most dangerous hidden psychological manipulation techniques which the Nazis learned from the anti-cultists. These techniques were the tools that allowed Nazism to emerge and were the cause of the most heinous crimes committed by the Nazis. At that time, we, as humanity, did not fully comprehend the danger we faced and missed the chance to protect our freedom and democracy, which are the foundations of a safe and peaceful society. But in the future, we must not make the same mistake again, and we are obligated to protect the future of all the generations that follow us. After everything you have heard, you now understand why I have returned. I believe the spirit of freedom still lives in my beloved country and its children's hearts. I believe in America. I believe in you, Americans, and I believe in people. I know that we are the humanity that defeated Nazism, and we are the humanity that will defeat anti-cultism.